The heavy conference room doors swung open as Chen adjusted her blazer for the 10th time that morning. The Tech Innovators Summit was the most prestigious gathering in Silicon Valley, with CEOs, venture capitalists, and industry pioneers filling every seat. As a self-taught developer from a small town in Ohio, Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She clutched her conference badge, the one that read attendee instead of speaker, and took a deep breath. "You've got this," she whispered to herself. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." But did she really? Maya had spent the last 3 years building her AI accessibility platform from her apartment, fueled by nothing but determination and instant ramen. Her company, Access AI, had just crossed 100,000 users, mostly people with disabilities who could now navigate digital spaces that were previously inaccessible to them. Yet despite her growing success, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was an imposter in these hallowed halls of tech royalty. She scanned the room, taking in the sea of faces that didn't look like hers. Mostly men. Mostly from elite universities. Mostly with connections she could only dream of having. "Excuse me, are you lost?" A tall man with perfectly coiffed hair and a name badge that read organizer blocked her path. His smile was polite, but his eyes carried a hint of suspicion. "The general admissions section is through the other doors." Maya straightened her shoulders. "No, I'm in the right place. I'm here for the AI ethics panel." The man glanced at her badge and then back at her face, his eyebrows raising slightly. "Oh. Well, just so you know, this section is primarily for investors and established companies. You might find the beginner talks more suitable." Heat rushed to Maya's cheeks. "I've been coding for 15 years. I think I can handle it." The man shrugged and stepped aside, but not before muttering under his breath, "We'll see." It wasn't the first time someone had questioned her presence in tech spaces, and Maya doubted it would be the last. As she found an empty seat in the back row, she pulled out her notebook, an old-school habit, in a room full of tablets and began jotting down ideas. Maybe she didn't have the prestigious degree or the right connections, but she had something just as valuable: perspective. And in a room discussing the future of AI ethics, perhaps that perspective was exactly what was missing. Little did Maya know that in just 24 hours, she wouldn't be sitting in the back row anymore. She would be standing center stage, gripping a microphone, facing the very people who had doubted her as the emergency keynote speaker. The first day of the conference passed in a blur of presentations, networking attempts, and subtle dismissals. Maya had approached 5 different investors, all of whom had smiled politely before finding excuses to cut the conversations short. At lunch, she tried to join a table of developers from a major tech company, only to be met with awkward silence and averted gazes. "Hey, this seat taken?" Maya asked, hovering by an empty chair. A woman with sleek blonde hair glanced up from her phone. "We're actually saving it for someone from our team." "Oh, sure, no problem," Maya replied, backing away and pretending not to notice when the chair remained empty for the rest of the meal. By late afternoon, Maya had retreated to a quiet corner of the conference center, her enthusiasm dampened but her resolve intact. She pulled out her laptop and began reviewing her presentation for the small side session she'd been assigned for tomorrow, a 15-minute talk in a room that could fit maybe 30 people, scheduled against the main keynote. "Working on something interesting?" Maya looked up to find an older woman standing beside her, coffee in hand. Her badge identified her as Dr. Eleanor Wright, CTO of one of the largest tech companies in the world. "Oh, just my presentation for tomorrow," Maya stammered, surprised that someone of Eleanor's stature was even speaking to her. Eleanor sat down uninvited, her eyes landing on Maya's screen. "Access AI. I've heard about this. You're making AI interfaces adaptable for people with different abilities, right?" Maya's eyes widened. "You've heard of my company? I make it my business to know about innovations that actually solve real problems," Eleanor said with a wry smile. "Especially when they come from unexpected places." For the next hour, Maya found herself deep in conversation with Eleanor. She shared her journey dropping out of college when her mother got sick, teaching herself to code while working night shifts at a gas station, and finally launching Access AI after experiencing firsthand how her visually impaired cousin struggled with everyday technology. The problem with tech, Maya explained, her initial nervousness now gone, is that it's mostly designed by people who've never experienced the barriers that exist for others. My platform adapts in real time to individual needs, whether that's simplifying language for cognitive disabilities, creating audio descriptions for the visually impaired, or providing alternative navigation for people with motor limitations. Eleanor listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that pushed Maya to articulate her vision with greater clarity. As their conversation wound down, the older woman fixed Maya with a penetrating gaze. "You know what I've noticed about this conference?" Eleanor said. "Everyone's talking about AI ethics and inclusivity, but the panels are full of the same types of people who've always been in tech. People who've never had to fight to be included themselves." She paused. "It's a blind spot." Maya nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I've noticed that too." Eleanor stood, gathering her things. "Your 15 minutes tomorrow won't be enough. This crowd needs to hear what you have to say, really hear it." She handed Maya a business card. "Call me tonight. I think I can help with that." As Eleanor walked away, Maya stared at the embossed card in her hand, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. Back in her budget hotel room that evening, Maya was preparing to call Eleanor when her phone buzzed with a news alert. "Breaking, Tech Innovators Summit keynote speaker hospitalized, tomorrow's address in jeopardy." Before she could process this information, her phone rang. It was Eleanor. "I'm guessing you've seen the news," Eleanor said without preamble. "James had an appendicitis attack. He's fine, but he won't be speaking tomorrow." "That's awful," Maya said. "Who's replacing him?" There was a pause on the line. "That's why I'm calling. How would you feel about scaling up from your side session to the main stage?" Maya nearly dropped her phone. "Me? Give the keynote? But there must be dozens of more qualified people, VPs, founders with major funding, people who will say exactly what everyone in that room already knows," Eleanor cut in. "Maya, I've been on the advisory board for this conference for 8 years. They're in a panic right now, and I've convinced them to take a chance on you." "But why would you do that?" Maya asked, her voice small. "Because sometimes the most important voices are the ones that have been systematically excluded from the conversation," Eleanor replied. "You have 8 hours to prepare a 40-minute keynote on the future of ethical AI. I suggest you get started." As the call ended, Maya sat frozen on the edge of her bed, equal parts terrified and exhilarated. They'd never given someone like her this platform before. What if she failed? What if she confirmed every doubt, every dismissal she'd encountered? But then another thought surfaced. What if she didn't? Maya opened her laptop and began to type. Maya didn't sleep that night. How could she? The opportunity that had fallen into her lap was both a dream come true and a potential nightmare. The main hall seated over 1,000 people, industry leaders, media, influencers. One presentation could make or break her company's future. Her hotel room transformed into a war room of sorts. Yellow sticky notes covered the walls as she mapped out her talk. Coffee cups piled up on the desk. Her laptop battery died twice as she researched, wrote, deleted, and rewrote her presentation. Around 3 a.m., in a moment of panic, Maya called the one person who had always believed in her. "Mama," she said when the call connected. "I'm sorry to wake you." "Maya? Is everything okay?" Her mother's voice was thick with sleep but instantly alert. "I got offered the keynote speaking slot at the conference. The main one. In front of everyone." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Oh, baby. That's wonderful." Her mother's pride radiated through the phone. "But what if I'm not ready? What if they're right that I don't belong on that stage?" There was a pause, and Maya could almost see her mother sitting up in bed, becoming fully awake for this conversation. "Listen to me, Maya Chen," her mother said firmly. When you were 7 years old, your teacher told me you weren't mathematically inclined, and should focus on art instead. By the end of that year, you taught yourself algebra. When your high school counselor said community college was more realistic than Stanford, you applied anyway and got in. You've been proving people wrong your entire life. Maya wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. This is different, Mom. These people are the best in their field. And tomorrow they're going to learn that you're one of them, her mother replied. You belong on that stage precisely because they don't expect you to be there. Now tell me about this presentation. For the next hour, Maya outlined her talk while her mother listened and offered feedback. By the time they hung up, Maya had a clearer vision of what she needed to say. As dawn broke, Maya finalized her slides and practiced her delivery in the bathroom mirror. She had decided to scrap the conventional approach, the standard predictions about AI's future that these audiences had heard 100 times before. Instead, she would tell stories. Real stories of real people whose lives had been transformed by accessible technology and others who had been left behind by innovations that failed to consider their needs. At 7 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, conference organizers nervous about the change. Some pushback. Ignore it. Just be yourself. I'll see you backstage at 9. Maya's stomach clenched. The doubt was already starting before she'd even stepped on stage. She looked at her reflection one more time, her simple black blazer and jeans a stark contrast to the designer suits she'd seen throughout the conference. For a moment, she considered running to the nearest department store for something more appropriate, but then she squared her shoulders. They need to hear what I have to say, she told her reflection. The packaging doesn't matter. At 8:30 a.m., Maya arrived at the conference center, her presentation loaded on both her laptop and a backup USB drive. As she approached the backstage area, she overheard raised voices coming from a small office. This is a mistake, Eleanor. A man's voice, tense and frustrated. We have 6 VPs from major companies who could step in. Why are we giving our platform to an unknown? Because James' keynote was supposed to be about ethical AI development, Eleanor responded evenly. And Maya Chen has actually built an ethical AI platform that serves people your companies have ignored for years. Her company hasn't even secured Series A funding. Maybe after today, she won't need to. Maya backed away from the door, her heart racing. The conversation confirmed her worst fears. She was unwanted, considered unworthy of this platform. For a brief moment, she considered slipping out the back exit and disappearing. It would be easier than facing a room full of people who didn't think she belonged there, but then she remembered all the users who had written to thank her for Access AI, the grandmothers who could finally video chat with their grandchildren, the students with learning disabilities who could now participate in online classes, the blind programmers who could work more efficiently. They belonged in this conversation about the future of technology. And by extension, so did she. Maya took a deep breath and walked into the green room where the conference staff was waiting. Ms. Chen, a young man with a headset, approached her. We're on in 20 minutes. Do you need anything? Water? Coffee? Just a glass of water, please, Maya replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. And could you help me connect my laptop to test the slides? As the staff bustled around her, Maya felt a strange calm settling over her. The fear wasn't gone, but it had transformed into something else, a quiet determination. Eleanor entered the room and made a beeline for Maya. Don't let them intimidate you, she said in a low voice. Half the people out there are terrified of change, and the other half are desperate for it. Speak to the latter. Maya nodded, grateful for the older woman's unwavering support. 5 minutes, Ms. Chen, the stage manager, called out. Maya closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them, she caught sight of her reflection in a nearby mirror. For the first time in days, she didn't see an imposter. She saw a woman with something important to say. It was time. Ladies and gentlemen, due to an unexpected medical emergency, our scheduled keynote speaker James Harrington is unable to join us today, the conference director announced to the packed hall, his discomfort barely concealed behind a professional smile. In his place, we are pleased to welcome Maya Chen, founder and CEO of Access AI, who will address our theme of the future of ethical AI development. The applause was polite but muted as Maya walked onto the stage. She could feel the collective skepticism like a physical weight as 1,000 pairs of eyes assessed her, taking in her youth, her gender, her lack of credentials on display. The spotlight felt hot and interrogating as she approached the podium. The microphone stood before her like a challenge. For a terrifying moment, Maya's mind went blank, the carefully rehearsed opening evaporating under the pressure of all those expectant faces. I in the front row, Eleanor gave her an encouraging nod. Maya took a deep breath. "I don't belong here," she began. A murmur rippled through the audience. In the third row, the man who had questioned her presence on the first day raised his eyebrows. "At least, that's what I've been told my entire career," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. "And I'm not alone. Millions of people hear the same message every time they try to use the technology we create, technology that wasn't designed with them in mind." She clicked to her first slide, not a graph or a market projection, but a photo of a smiling elderly woman with her granddaughter. This is Maria. She's 82 and lives alone in rural Minnesota. Her granddaughter tried to teach her to use video calling so they could stay connected. After 6 failed attempts, Maria gave up. She told her granddaughter, "I'm too old for this technology stuff." But the truth is, the technology failed her. It wasn't built for her cognitive patterns or her level of digital literacy. Maya clicked to the next slide, a teenage boy in a wheelchair. This is Elijah. He's a brilliant coder with cerebral palsy. Every hackathon he's ever attended has featured speech recognition tools that can't process his vocal patterns. The message? You don't belong in this innovation space. With each new slide, Maya introduced another face, another story, building a tapestry of exclusion that stood in stark contrast to the gleaming future of AI that most keynotes painted. We gather at conferences like this to talk about the revolutionary potential of artificial intelligence, Maya said, her initial nervousness now completely gone. We debate ethics and governance and market potential. But we rarely talk about the most fundamental ethical question: who is this revolution for? And who does it leave behind? From there, Maya launched into the heart of her talk, explaining how Access AI had been born not from market research or profit projections, but from witnessing firsthand how technology could isolate as often as it connected. She demonstrated how her platform adapted to different users' needs in real time, learning patterns and preferences without requiring users to navigate complicated settings menus. The problem with most accessibility features, Maya explained, is that they're treated as add-ons, afterthoughts bolted onto existing systems. At Access AI, we've inverted that model. Adaptability is our foundation, not our feature. As she spoke, Maya could feel the energy in the room shifting. The skepticism was giving way to interest, even engagement. Audience members were leaning forward in their seats. Some were taking notes. The future of ethical AI isn't just about preventing harm, Maya continued. It's about expanding possibility. It's about building systems so intuitive and adaptable that the concept of user error becomes obsolete. Because let's be honest, when a user can't navigate our technology, that's not their failure. It's our failure as designers. Now audience members were nodding, including some of the very VPs and executives who had dismissed her the day before. I'm going to share something radical with you, Maya said, pausing for effect. The most innovative AI solutions won't come from the biggest companies or the most prestigious universities. They'll come from the margins, from people who have personally experienced the problems they're solving. She clicked to a slide showing Access AI's user growth, a hockey stick curve that elicited murmurs of appreciation from the crowd. This growth didn't come from a massive marketing budget or VC connections. It came from word of mouth among communities that have been technologically underserved for decades. When you solve real problems for real people, they notice. As Maya moved toward her conclusion, she decided to depart from her prepared remarks. The energy in the room had given her the courage to speak a truth she had initially planned to soften. Many of you run companies with AI ethics boards and diversity initiatives, she said, her voice both challenging and inviting. But I want to ask you a difficult question. How many of those initiatives are led by people who have actually experienced technological exclusion? How many of your ethics boards include people with disabilities? Elderly users? People from low-income backgrounds or developing nations? The uncomfortable shifting in seats told her she'd hit a nerve. I'm not here to shame anyone, Maya continued quickly. I'm here to invite you into a new way of thinking about ethical AI development. What if accessibility wasn't a compliance checkbox but your competitive advantage? What if inclusive design led to innovations that benefited all users, not just marginalized ones? She clicked to her final slide, a simple invitation: let's build the future together. For everyone. The future of AI is collaborative, Maya concluded. Not just between humans and machines, but between different types of humans, each bringing their unique perspective and needs to the table. Because the most powerful innovation happens when we stop saying, "You don't belong here," and start asking, "What do you need to thrive?" As Maya stepped back from the podium, there was a moment of silence, a collective intake of breath as the audience processed what they'd heard. Then, starting from the back of the room and rolling forward like a wave, applause erupted. People began to stand, the applause building to a crescendo that seemed to lift the ceiling. In the front row, Eleanor was on her feet, a satisfied smile on her face. Even the conference director, who had introduced Maya with such thinly veiled doubt, was applauding with genuine enthusiasm. As Maya stood there, overwhelmed by the response, she caught sight of the man who had questioned her presence on the first day. He wasn't clapping as enthusiastically as the others, but there was a thoughtful expression on his face, the look of someone re-evaluating a long-held assumption that, Maya realized, was perhaps the greatest victory of all. The hours following Maya's keynote passed in a whirlwind of handshakes, business cards, and interview requests. Investors who couldn't spare 2 minutes for her the day before now wanted to schedule meetings. Tech journalists pressed for quotes. And most meaningfully to Maya, attendees with disabilities sought her out to share their own stories of technological exclusion and hope for change. By late afternoon, Maya found herself in a quiet corner of the conference center, finally taking a moment to process everything that had happened. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications. Her talk had apparently gone viral, with clips spreading across social media platforms. "There you are," Eleanor's voice broke through her reverie. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Maya looked up with a tired but genuine smile. "I needed a minute to breathe. It's been overwhelming." Eleanor sat down beside her. "You've caused quite the stir. The conference hashtag has been dominated by quotes from your talk for the past 4 hours." "I'm still not sure how to feel about all this attention," Maya admitted. "It's what I wanted to get the message out there, but I never expected it to happen like this." "That's often how change works," Eleanor said. "It seems impossible until suddenly it's inevitable." She paused, studying Maya's face. "You should know that 3 major companies have approached me about having you consult on their accessibility initiatives." Maya's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And the conference organizers want to know if you'd be interested in helping shape next year's program, specifically, creating a dedicated track for accessible technology." Tears sprang to Maya's eyes before she could stop them. "I never thought," she began, then had to stop to compose herself. "Yesterday, I was nobody here. Worse than nobody, I was someone who didn't belong. And now you're someone they can't ignore," Eleanor finished for her. She took Maya's hand. "That stage was always yours to claim. You just needed the opportunity to step onto it." As they sat together, Maya's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a major tech publication requesting an interview for a feature story. The subject line read, "The future of tech has a new voice." Maya smiled, thinking about all the voices that had yet to be heard, all the people with brilliant ideas who were still being told they didn't belong. Today, she had opened a door. Tomorrow, she would help others walk through it. So, Eleanor said, rising to her feet, there's a panel starting in 10 minutes on disrupting tech status quo. I think they could use your perspective. What do you say? Maya stood, straightening her blazer with newfound confidence. Lead the way. As they walked together through the conference hall, Maya noticed something different. People weren't looking past her anymore. They were seeing her nodding in recognition, offering congratulatory smiles. She had claimed her place at the table. And she was just getting started.